Rise of a Hero, written by ShoutingRambler and narrated by VintrBjorn. From blood comes all. Each of us is brought into this world amidst the blood and screams, and many of us leave it amidst the blood and the screams. We swear oaths by it, pride ourselves on generations of it. We hunger for it and fear it. From blood we are risen. Prologue. Odrin ran his hand along the arm of the throne. The cool stone sent shivers through him, a deep sense of victory thrumming through the very core of his body. Taken from the black stone of the Tipanese mountain range in the east, it had been commissioned by the emperor after his victory in the Ottonian Wars to keep the provinces in line. Work on it had only just begun. The finest stonemasons had been called for to carve the massive block into an ornate and intimidating seat fit for a ruler, an emperor. It was a chilling thought, both exhilarating and frightening. He had never meant for this to happen. In all of his wildest dreams, he never could have imagined this. This land, these people, they would all know his name. This city, this country, the far distant provinces, his name would be whispered in awe and respect and fear amongst them all. His power would be unchallenged as protector of the throne. He had worked for some time for this ending, and yet he had never dared to imagine that he would truly succeed. He was not a mighty man, but he had not won this day through might. His tall stature and slightly wide shoulders gave him an imposing appearance to those who did not know him well, but in no way was he intimidating in nature. His dark brown hair was shaggy compared to how he normally wore it. His skin pale from long days working inside the Imperial Library away from the sun. No, his victory had not come through brute force, but through guile and cunning. It had never been his intention, but when ensnared in a web of deceit and betrayal, he took the threads and weaved his own. He had trapped those who had sought to use him as a pawn and dispose of them. He had almost wished that it would never have come to this. Despite his victory, this day was dark and tainted. The stones of the Imperial Palace were awash with blood, and the halls echoed with screams and ringing steel. The sound still made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. Horrible, unspeakable things that he had never wished to see, had transpired that day. He felt as though his soul had been stained by the blood that still dripped from the blade of his dagger. He would have liked that there had been far less bloodshed, but change was difficult, and he had to secure the throne. He had to make sure that the succession was safe. Time would tell, but the people would see he had only done the right thing. In the chaos, the uprising, the fear and the treachery, he had ensured that the throne would not be taken by anyone but their true heir. He would hold it safely. "Odrin!" A voice boomed as the throne doors slammed open. His heart stopped at the sound. That sound was a death knell for his plans, a note of utter devastation for what he had managed to accomplish. Months of meticulous planning, of watching and waiting and careful planning were falling to pieces around him at the hands of a muscle-bound barbarian who had only just gotten trapped in the middle of it all. How could he have made it this far? It was supposed to have been impossible. Yet there his brother stood in the doorway, sword in hand with blood-splattered armor, donned like a god of war rather than detained and thrown in shackles. Blonde hair loose from its bonds and soaked with crimson, blood splayed across his face. His brother had never looked more terrifying. He was a warrior a warrior in every way, and now he looked like one of the great heroes come out of myth and legend. Arrayed behind him were his own vassals, loyal to the death, every single one, even the foreigners. Odrin's own warriors had been meant to guard the door and keep his brother out. That was what had gone wrong, what he had failed to take into account. As polarizing a figure as his brother was, those who loved him were loyal to a fault. Love and respect were showered upon him with open and willing hearts. Odrin's men had failed in the face of such devotion, but of course they had. They had not even been his men until only a few hours ago. "Hageon, my brother," Odrin answered smoothly, past the sickening knot in his stomach. "How fortuitous. The usurper is dead, and here we both stand to deliver the throne to the rightful heir." A look of relief washed over Hageon's face, and for a flash of a moment, Odrin's heart ached as his brother's shoulders sagged wearily, and he lowered his sword. He crossed the great room in just a few steps, and Odrin gave a muffled grunt of protest as Hageon hugged him tightly. It felt like an eternity before his elder brother released him, stepping back with one hand remaining on Odrin's shoulder. "Odrin, the heir has been slain. House Calvis is no more. The man responsible has been apprehended and is being interrogated as we speak, but answers cannot revive the dead, and there is an empire in need of a ruler at the moment." Odrin felt cold. The heir was slain. The sweet, innocent girl was dead in the midst of all this. Odrin hung his head for a moment, the wind taken out of him. Never would he have seen Lycia dead. He had done all of this to protect her, to make sure that she could take her father's place against Hageon's monstrous ambitions. A shudder went through him as he imagined her as he had last seen her, vibrant and beautiful and willful. The gods were cruel. They had condemned him and fated her to pass beyond this world. "We can rule, my brother," Hageon whispered urgently, leaning in close. "Never would I have dreamt it, and never would I have desired it, but you and I know the truth of what happened here today, and everything we have fought for will fall to ruin if we do not establish control quickly. Do you know what happens when a ruler dies with no heir? The wolves close in and fight for the scraps. The empire will tear itself apart without an immediate leader." Odrin's voice choked in his throat. He still could not entirely understand how it had all come to this, how he had made an enemy of his brother to this point of no return, but it was to no return. Hageon had usurped the throne, and the heir had been murdered in the coup. Odrin was alone. Although Hageon had retired after the war for expansion had been won, he still had brigades that would easily rise to his call. Odrin had nothing but the few he had managed to convince in the past few months. Openly opposing his brother now would mean banishment or death, and neither suited his cause. It seemed he would have to acquiesce to his brother's plan. Hageon's gaze was heavy, and Odrin never truly looked him in the eyes. Perhaps he could have seen the shame in his elder brother's eyes, the hurt and the need, but he did not look. If he would only have cared to see, he might have known that this was not what his brother had wanted. "You should take it," Odrin said quietly, head bowed ever so slightly in defeat, stepping aside to gesture at the throne. Hageon looked surprised. "You are sure? You have no wish to contest it, to claim it for yourself?" Odrin forced as earnest a smile as he could, thinking back to their happy days together as children when Hageon kept him safe from anything and everything. "My brother, You have commanded men in battle, and won not only many famous battles, but a war as well. I have kept myself in the archives and the library, and commanded no one. It is you who should seat the throne, for the good of House Zalgeus, and for the Cirastian Empire." Hageon regarded the throne, his hand still weighing on Odrin's shoulder. Odrin gave him a nod of encouragement, clasping his wrist with a hearty grip. Hageon nodded, and when he spoke, the heaviness of his heart lent to the austerity of his voice. "I am Emperor now. I claim the throne by right of conquest. I will tell all that you were my greatest ally during these times of chaos and turmoil, and make it clear that you held the throne for me until I reached it. You will have power, and you will be my closest advisor. You will have a name of your own and my steadfast alliance and trust. Together, we will restore our name and our empire." Odrin still felt as though he was drowning. It was Hageon's fault that the true heir was dead. He could pass it off any way that he cared to, but Odrin did not doubt that the girl had been killed somehow because of his brother. Odrin had always stood in Hageon's shadow. He had never had a name, but the second son of a lesser house, the younger brother of the great imperial commander renowned for conquest and victory. This had been his chance. He would have stood above all and been known. He would have had Hageon the Almighty kneel before him and swear fealty, be his general and war counselor. He should have known that Hageon would never have been satisfied with such a low title. His elder brother would have chafed at serving the younger. "Hail, my brother! Hail the Emperor, Emperor Hageon Zalgeus!" Hageon sat upon the throne, and his men knelt, all but the Pelderai woman from their neighbor to the north. Tall for a woman, and fair, and poised with the power and grace of a warrior queen, her people still stood independent from the Empire, and her presence amidst the coup was mere happenstance of meeting his brother on the road some months ago. She would serve as a witness, an ambassador of sorts for her nation. His men repeated the cheer with their heads bowed and their swords drawn and presented in front of them. "Hail, Emperor Hageon Zalgeus," she said quietly, giving Hageon a nod with an appropriate air of gravitas.